In the years before the First World War, the British Navy moved across the oceans with a quiet assurance. Ships glided through calm waters, their polished hulls reflecting the pale morning sun. Decks were orderly, crewmen drilled with a rhythm as familiar as the tide itself. The Admiralty's confidence was deep-rooted, born from decades of dominance over the seas and a belief that Britain's naval power was unchallenged. Sailors rose with the sun, performing routines honed over generations. Gun turrets turned with mechanical precision, signal flags snapped crisply in the breeze, and officers inspected every detail with calm scrutiny. Even the smallest ships carried an air of control, every rope, every sail, every bolt a testament to meticulous preparation. From the bridge, captains could watch the horizon without fear, secure in the knowledge that the fleet's presence alone was a deterrent. Trade convoys moved effortlessly along established routes. Fishing vessels, merchant ships, and passenger liners slipped in and out of harbors, guided by lighthouses and naval patrols. The sea seemed predictable, almost gentle, a stage for Britain's well-rehearsed maritime order. For those on board, life at sea felt steady, safe, and almost timeless. Yet beneath this calm surface, distant experiments and emerging technologies would soon ripple across the oceans. For now, the British Navy sailed unaware of the subtle forces that would test its supremacy in ways no one could yet imagine. In the years before the First World War, the British Navy moved across the oceans with a quiet assurance. Ships glided through calm waters, their polished hulls reflecting the pale morning sun. Decks were orderly, crewmen drilled with a rhythm as familiar as the tide itself. The Admiralty's confidence was deep-rooted, born from decades of dominance over the seas and a belief that Britain's naval power was unchallenged. Sailors rose with the sun, performing routines honed over generations. Gun turrets turned with mechanical precision, signal flags snapped crisply in the breeze, and officers inspected every detail with calm scrutiny. Even the smallest ships carried an air of control, every rope, every sail, every bolt a testament to meticulous preparation. From the bridge, captains could watch the horizon without fear, secure in the knowledge that the fleet's presence alone was a deterrent. Trade convoys moved effortlessly along established routes. Fishing vessels, merchant ships, and passenger liners slipped in and out of harbors, guided by lighthouses and naval patrols. The sea seemed predictable, almost gentle, a stage for Britain's well-rehearsed maritime order. For those on board, life at sea felt steady, safe, and almost timeless. Yet beneath this calm surface, distant experiments and emerging technologies would soon ripple across the oceans. For now, the British Navy sailed unaware of the subtle forces that would test its supremacy in ways no one could yet imagine. Across the North Sea, German engineers were quietly exploring something that at first glance seemed almost playful, a small fleet of experimental submarines. These early machines, constrained by fragile hulls and limited propulsion, could barely traverse shallow waters without risking entrapment. To the British, news of these underwater toys was amusing. Reports trickled in describing awkward hulls, tiny periscopes, and crews squeezed into tight compartments, struggling just to keep the machines afloat. Naval officers shared these accounts with mild laughter during briefings. Hardly a threat, some noted, more a curiosity than a weapon. In the calm of London offices, the idea of a submarine capable of challenging the Royal Navy felt distant, almost fanciful. Maps still showed trade routes as inviolate lines, and strategic plans remained unshaken by these small, experimental vessels. Yet, in that gentle dismissal, tension quietly brewed. The seeds of disruption were hidden in these awkward forms, machines that could slip beneath the surface, invisible and unheralded. For now, the British watched, unconcerned, unaware that the very experiments they treated lightly would, in time, alter the balance of the seas. The irony lingered softly, like a shadow along the horizon. The tools of surprise were already taking shape beneath calm waves that seemed so secure. From the docks of London to ports across the empire, trade moved with reassuring regularity. Merchant vessels departed on schedule, hulls heavy with coal, timber, and grain. Sailors loaded cargo with practiced efficiency, ropes creaking in harmony with the gentle sway of the tide. Lighthouses blinked steadily on the horizon, guiding ships along well-charted courses. Harbor pilots waved and signaled, ensuring every ship stayed its appointed path. At sea, convoys glided past fishing fleets, dolphins darting alongside, gulls circling above. Smoke from funnels drifted lazily into the wind. Officers checked logs, and midshipmen traced courses across charts, unaware of any immediate danger. Waves lapped against the hulls, a quiet rhythm that seemed eternal. There was a sense of security that pervaded every movement, every action, the confidence of a navy that believed the oceans belonged to them. Across these waters, the rhythm of daily life continued undisturbed. Merchants counted profits, sailors hummed familiar tunes, and officers exchanged casual remarks on the weather and horizon. For those who lived and worked along these routes, the sea was a reliable. And though the exercises were isolated, the implications were enormous. Every perfect maneuver hinted at the potential to disrupt entire shipping lanes. The calm discipline of these tests masked a growing shadow, one that would soon ripple across oceans and challenge centuries of naval confidence. The quiet lessons learned beneath the waves foreshadowed a war that would feel very different once the hunters finally emerged. In the early months of the conflict, U-boats began their work quietly, almost imperceptibly. Merchant vessels traveling along established trade routes noticed minor disruptions, a ship delayed here, a cargo manifest missing there. Each incident alone seemed small, a ripple rather than a wave. Yet patterns emerged over time. Convoys that once crossed the North Sea with ease now faced invisible hazards, moving through waters where danger could not be seen until it was already upon them. The attacks were methodical. Submerged predators struck without warning, leaving crews puzzled by sudden explosions or empty messages from lost ships. The ocean, once familiar and routine, became a corridor of quiet uncertainty. British trade, the lifeblood of the nation and the empire, encountered its first real vulnerability. Goods that had flowed predictably now arrived late or not at all, and even experienced sailors began to sense that the world they had taken for granted had subtly changed. For those observing from shore or harbor, the shift was gradual, almost imperceptible. It was not the roar of battle, but the steady hum of a strategy unfolding beneath the waves. Slowly, the contours of modern maritime warfare revealed themselves. The calm confidence of the pre-war seas was beginning to erode, replaced by an understanding that the ocean could now carry not only trade, but threat in equal measure. Reports of missing ships and unexplained sinkings arrived at Admiralty offices in London, delivered by officers accustomed to routine and order. Early accounts were met with polite skepticism. A minor mishap, some suggested, perhaps poor seamanship, navigational errors. Admirals leaned back in polished chairs, peering over maps dotted with dots that seemed to deny any real pattern. The idea that small, stealthy submarines could pose a meaningful threat was difficult to reconcile with decades of naval dominance. Staff officers discussed U-boats in hushed, almost amused tones. They were referred to as curiosities or toys of the deep, distractions rather than dangers. The notion that Germany could challenge British trade routes beneath the waterline seemed fanciful. Maps and statistics reassured them that numbers, experience, and fleet size remained firmly on Britain's side. Confidence, long nurtured, created a calm that bordered on complacency. Yet, for the viewer, irony hums beneath every word. The Admiralty's dismissal of the threat contrasts sharply with the unfolding reality. Each lost vessel, each unexplained disappearance, silently accumulates into a quiet warning. The audience senses that the rules of the oceans are shifting, even as those charged with defending them remain momentarily unprepared. In this space between expectation and reality, tension begins to take root. Subtle but insistent, like the first stirrings of a storm on the horizon. Across the British Isles, the consequences of the silent U-boat campaign began to ripple into daily life. Merchants waiting for shipments of coal, timber, and grain found schedules unreliable. Factories paused, their furnaces dimming as essential materials failed to arrive. Sailors on remaining vessels moved with caution, ever aware that the waters they traversed carried an unseen menace. The rhythm of commerce, once predictable and comforting, now carried a quiet uncertainty. In towns and villages, shopkeepers noticed empty shelves where imported goods once stood. Families adjusted meals and routines, learning to stretch supplies. Letters from sailors described sudden encounters with torpedoes or the eerie calm of a cargo vessel disappearing from view. Civilians listened to these accounts with a mixture of worry and resignation, realizing that the distant war could touch them in subtle but tangible ways. Despite the disruption, life continued. People adapted, communities adjusted, and the human capacity for resilience became evident. The menace remained invisible, yet its impact was tangible, reshaping not only trade but daily experience. Observers could feel the tension in the air, the sense that the ocean was no longer a simple highway of commerce. Through these quiet changes, the viewer begins to understand the stakes. The war is no longer a distant event, but a force subtly infiltrating the routines of everyday life, foreshadowing a conflict that will reach every corner of the home front. By mid-war, the isolated strikes of individual submarines had evolved into coordinated operations, known to history as Wolfpacks. Rather than acting alone, U-boats moved in silent collaboration beneath the waves, guided by radio signals and careful planning. They tracked convoys together, positioning themselves strategically, a shadow network moving beneath the surface. Where once one ship might vanish quietly, now entire groups of vessels were vulnerable simultaneously. The beauty and terror of the system lay in its subtlety. Ships steaming along familiar routes could find themselves surrounded, torpedoes striking from unseen directions. No cannon fired above the waves, no explosions announced the approach, yet the change in strategy required patience and discipline. Officers calculated routes meticulously, accounting for tides, currents, and the probable positions of U-boats. Sailors learned new routines, balancing speed with vigilance, trusting that the layers of defense would function as intended. Convoys moved with a rhythm that combined caution with purpose, an orchestration of human effort and mechanical ingenuity. From the shore, these measures brought a quiet reassurance. Shipping losses, once shocking in their frequency, began to slow. Confidence returned incrementally, not in triumphant declarations, but in the measured progress of a strategy gradually asserting itself. The ocean, though still fraught with hidden danger, now felt more navigable, a space where human ingenuity and persistence could counter the silent hunters lurking beneath. News of sinkings, combined with the introduction of convoys, reached the public in a careful rhythm, filtered through newspapers and official statements. Initially, citizens had reacted with alarm as merchant ships disappeared, bread and coal shipments were delayed, and letters from sailors became sparse. Anxiety quietly spread, threaded with curiosity about the machines and men beneath the waves. The invisible nature of the threat amplified the unease. Danger could not be seen, only felt through absence and uncertainty. Over time, the visible measures taken by the Navy, convoys, armed escorts, and tales of depth-charge successes gradually restored confidence. Communities recognized that the threat, though real, was being actively countered. People adjusted expectations, rationed cautiously, and developed a patient understanding of the fragile balance between risk and resilience. A sense of shared purpose emerged, linking sailors, officers, merchants, and civilians in a collective effort to maintain lifelines across the oceans. The quiet shift in perception illustrates an important truth. Warfare extends beyond battlefields. It reaches homes, markets, and public consciousness, reshaping how societies experience tension, loss, and adaptation. The U-boat campaign, though unseen, influenced morale as much as it did trade routes, proving that psychological and social responses are as vital to a nation's survival as the strategies executed on the seas. Behind every convoy and sonar experiment, human decisions shaped the response to the U-boat threat. Admirals pored over charts, calculating optimal routes, weighing risk versus necessity. Staff officers considered the lives of crews and civilians alike, balancing strategic priorities with ethical responsibility. Each decision carried weight. A miscalculation could cost dozens of sailors, disrupt essential supplies, or alter public perception. The burden of leadership was quiet but immense. Strategists worked tirelessly to innovate, testing new technologies, improving communication protocols, and coordinating international cooperation. Their insights often arose from small observations: a periscope sighting, a pattern in reported sinkings, the timing of tidal currents. Every calculation, adjustment, and recommendation reflected human judgment intertwined with mechanical systems. They did not rely solely on technology. They relied on the ability to anticipate, to reason, and to weigh competing outcomes in moments of uncertainty. For the viewer, this human element brings resonance beyond tactics and engineering. It reminds us that wars are shaped not only by machines or strategies, but by the choices and reflections of those who bear responsibility. Admirals and officers became silent partners in survival, their deliberations a blend of intellect, empathy, and foresight. The story of adaptation is therefore not just about ships and submarines, but about the people guiding them, navigating uncertainty, and quietly shaping the course of events beneath and above the waves. The introduction of unrestricted submarine warfare left a mark on naval strategy that would last well beyond the First World War. By striking without warning, targeting both military and merchant vessels, submarines demonstrated that control of the seas no longer depended solely on fleet size. A single, well-positioned U-boat could disrupt entire supply chains, forcing nations to rethink the fundamentals of maritime security. This quiet revolution, emerging from steel, ingenuity, and strategy, revealed the vulnerabilities hidden beneath even the most confident naval powers. Observers noted the broader implications. The oceans were no longer simple highways of commerce and communication. They had become contested spaces where stealth and precision rivaled raw firepower. Naval doctrines evolved, anticipating threats invisible to the naked eye. Governments, planners, and civilians alike had to internalize a new reality. The seas could no longer be assumed safe, and human ingenuity would forever be required to counter unseen dangers. In this reflection, the viewer senses a pattern familiar to other conflicts. The impact of technology unfolds gradually, shaping behavior and expectations long before it becomes obvious in headlines. Unrestricted submarine warfare, though once limited in scale, exemplified how innovation combined with strategy could quietly reshape the relationship between human societies and their environment, leaving lessons that endured far beyond the immediate conflict. The measures taken by the British Navy gradually began to bear fruit. Convoys, once a cautious experiment,